Good afternoon, dear friends. Today is the 8th of August, and I'm glad to see you. This is a fairy tale, the tale about the thief of Alexandria and the chief of police, Arabian Nights. Once upon a time, there was a chief of police in Alexandria called Hassan al-Din, the sharp scimitar of the faith. Now one night, as he was sitting at his desk, a trooper came running into his office and said, "My lord, I entered your city this very night, and soon after I went to sleep at a certain khan. I awoke to find my saddlebags sliced open, and a purse with 1,000 gold pieces missing." No sooner had he finished speaking than the chief summoned all his officers and ordered them to seize all the people in the khan and throw them into jail. The next morning he had rods and whips brought to his office, and after sending for the prisoners, he intended to have them flogged until someone confessed to the theft in the presence of the owner. Just then, however, a man broke through the crowd of people at his office and went straight to the chief. "Stop," he cried out. "Let these people go. They've been falsely accused. It was I who robbed this trooper. Look, here's the purse I stole from his saddlebags." Upon saying this, he pulled out the purse from his sleeve and laid it before Hassan al-Din, who said to the soldier, "Take your money and put it away. You no longer have any grounds to lodge a complaint against these people of the Khan." Thereupon the people of the Khan and all those present began praising the thief and blessing him. However, he said, "Please stop. It doesn't take much skill to bring the purse to the chief in person, but it does take a great deal of skill to take it a second time from this trooper." "And how did you manage to do that?" asked the thief. And the robber replied, "My lord, I was standing in the money changers shop at Cairo when I saw the soldier receive the gold in change and put it into his purse. So I followed him from street to street, but did not find the right opportunity to steal it. Then he left Cairo, and I followed from town to town, plotting along the way to rob him without avail, until I entered this city, where I dogged him to the Khan. There I took my lodgings next to him and waited until he fell asleep. Then I went up to him quietly, and I slit open his saddlebags with his knife and took the purse just as I am taking it now. No sooner had he spoken those words than he stretched out his hand and grabbed the purse from the trooper in front of the chief, and everyone thought that he was merely demonstrating how he had committed the theft. But all at once he broke into a run and sprang into a nearby river. The chief of police shouted to his officers, "Stop that thief!" and his men ran after him. But before they could doff their clothes and descend the steps of the river, he had made it to the other side. Of course, they continued searching for him, but there was no way they could find him, for he was able to escape through the back streets and lanes of Alexandria. So the officers returned without the purse, and the chief of police said to the trooper, "I can't do anything for you now. The people are innocent, and your money was returned to you. But you weren't wise enough to protect it from the thief." Consequently, the trooper was compelled to live without his money, while the people were delivered from his hands and those of the chief of police. And all this had the blessing of Almighty Allah. No sooner had Scheherazade concluded her story than she said, "And yet, O king, this tale is no more wondrous than the tale of Prince Bahram and the Princess Al-Datma." Prince Bahram and the Princess Al-Datma. There was once a king's daughter called Al-Datma, who in her time had no equal in beauty and grace. In addition to her lovely looks, she was brilliant and feisty and took great pleasure in ravishing the wits of the male sex. In fact, she used to boast, "There is nobody who can match me in anything." And the fact is that she was most accomplished in horsemanship and martial exercises, and all those things a cavalier should know. Given her qualities, numerous princes sought her hand in marriage, but she rejected them all. Instead, she proclaimed, "No man shall marry me unless he defeats me with his lance and sword in faith battle. He who succeeds I will gladly wed. But if I overcome him, I will take his horse, clothes, and arms, and brand his head with the following words: This is the freedman of Al-Datma." Now the sons of kings flocked to her from every quarter, far and near. But she prevailed and put them to shame, stripping them of their arms and branding them with fire. Soon a son of the king of Persia named Bahram ibn Taji heard about her and journeyed from afar to her father's court. He brought men and horses with him and a great deal of wealth and royal treasures. When he drew near the city, he sent her father a rich present, and the king came out to meet him and bestowed great honors on him. Then the king's son sent a message to him through his vizier and requested his daughter's hand in marriage. However, the king answered, "With regard to my daughter Aldatma, I have no power over her, for she has sworn by her soul to marry no one but him who defeats her in the listed field. I journeyed here from my father's court with no other purpose but this," the prince declared. "I came here to woo her and to form an alliance with her." "Then you shall meet her tomorrow," said the king. So the next day he sent for his daughter, who got ready for battle by donning her armor of war. Since the people of the kingdom had heard about the coming joust, they flocked from all sides of the field. Soon the princess rode into the lists, armed head to toe with her visor down, and the Persian king's son came out to meet her, equipped in the fairest of fashions. Then they charged at each other and fought a long time, wheeling and sparing, advancing and retreating. And the princess realized that he had more courage and skill than she had ever encountered before. Indeed, she began to fear that he might put her to shame before the bystanders and defeat her. Consequently, she decided to trick him, and raising her visor, she showed her face, which appeared more radiant than the full moon, and when he saw it, he was bewildered by her beauty. His strength failed, and his spirit faltered. When she perceived this moment of weakness, she attacked and knocked him from his saddle. Consequently, he became like a sparrow in the clutches of an eagle. Amazed and confused, he did not know what was happening to him when she took his steed, clothes, and armor. Then, after branding him with fire, she let him go his way. When he recovered from his stupor, he spent several days without food, drink, or sleep. Indeed, love had gripped his heart. Finally, he decided to send a letter to his father via a messenger informing him that he could not return home until he had won the princess or died for want of her. When his sire received the letter, he was extremely distressed about his son and wanted to rescue him by sending troops and soldiers. However, his ministers dissuaded him from this action and advised him to be patient. So he prayed to Almighty Allah for guidance. In the meantime, the prince thought of different ways to attain his goal, and soon he decided to disguise himself as a decrepit old man. So he put a white bird over his own black one and went to the garden where the princess used to walk most of the days. Here he sought out the gardener and said to him, I am a stranger from a country far away, and from my youth onward I've been a gardener, and nobody is more skilled than I am in the grafting of trees and cultivating fruit, flowers, and vines. When the gardener heard this, he was extremely pleased and led him into the garden, where he led him to his work. So the prince began to tend the garden and improved the Persian water wheels and the irrigation channels. One day, as he was occupied with some work, he saw some slaves enter the garden, leading mules and carrying carpets and vessels, and he asked them what they were doing there. The princess wants to spend an enjoyable afternoon here, they answered. When he heard these words, he rushed to his lodging and fetched some jewels and ornaments he had brought with him from home. After returning to the garden, he sat down and spread some of the valuable items before him while shaking and pretending to be a very old man. And Scheherazade noticed that dawn was approaching and stopped telling her story. When the next night arrived, however, she received the king's permission to continue her tale and said, in fact, the prince made it seem as if he were extremely decrepit and senile. After an hour or so, a company of damsels and eunuchs entered the garden with the princess, who looked just like the radiant moon among the stars. They ran about the garden, plucking fruits and enjoying themselves, until they caught sight of the prince, disguised as an old man, sitting under one of the trees. The man's hands and feet were trembling from old age, and he had spread a great many precious jewels and regal ornaments before him. Of course, they were astounded by this and asked him what he was doing there with the jewels. I want to use these trinkets, he said, to buy me a wife from among the lot of you. They all laughed at him and said, if one of us marries you, what will you do with her? I'll give you one kiss, he replied, and then divorce her. If that's the case, said the princess, I'll give this damsel to you for your wife. So he rose, leaned on his staff, staggered toward the damsel, and gave her a kiss. Right after that he gave her the jewels and ornaments, whereupon she rejoiced, and they all went on their way, laughing at him. The next day they came again to the garden, and they found him seated in the same place, with more jewels and ornaments than before spread before him. "Oh, Sheikh," they asked him, "what are you doing? What are you going to do with all this jewelry?" "I want to wed one of you again," he answered, "just as I did yesterday." So the princess said, "I'll marry you to this damsel." And the prince went up to her, kissed her, and gave her the jewels, and they all went their way. After seeing how generous the old man was to her slave girls, the princess said to herself, I have more right to these fine things than my slaves, and there's surely no danger involved in this game. So when morning arrived, she went down by herself into the garden, dressed as one of her own damsels, and she appeared all alone before the prince, and said to him, Old man, the king's daughter has sent me to you, so that you can marry me. When he looked at her, he knew who she was. So he answered, With all my heart and love. And he gave her the finest and costliest of jewels and ornaments. Then he rose to kiss her, and since she was not on her guard, and thought she had nothing to fear, he grabbed hold of her with his strong hands and threw her down on the ground, where he deprived her of her maidenhead. Then he pulled the beard from his face and said, Do you recognize me? Who are you? I am Bahram, the king of Persia's son. He replied, I've changed myself and have become a stranger to my people, all for your sake, and I have lavished my treasures for your love. She rose from him in silence and did not say a word to him. Indeed, she was dazed by what had happened and felt that it was best to be silent, especially since she did not want to be shamed. All the while she was thinking to herself, if I kill myself, it will be senseless, and if I have him put to death, there's nothing that I'd really gain. The best thing for me to do is to escape with him to his own country. So after leaving him in the garden, she gathered together her money and treasures and sent him a message informing him what she intended to do and telling him to get ready to depart with his possessions and whatever else he needed. Then they set a rendezvous for their departure. At the appointed time, they mounted race horses and set out under cover of darkness, and by the next morning they had traveled a great distance. They kept traveling at fast pace until they drew near his father's capital in Persia. And when his father heard about his son's coming, he rode out to meet him with his troops and was full of joy. After a few days went by, the king of Persia sent a splendid present to the prince's father along with a letter to the effect that his daughter was with him and requested her wedding outfit. Al-Datma's father greeted the messenger with a happy heart, for he thought he had lost his daughter and had been grieving for her. In response to the king's letter, he summoned the Qazi and the witness and drew up a marriage contract between his daughter and the Prince of Persia. In addition, he bestowed robes of honor on the envoys from the king of Persia and sent his daughter her marriage equipage. After the official wedding took place, Prince Behram lived with her until death came and sundered their union. No sooner had Shahrazad concluded her tale than she said, "And yet, O king, this tale is no more wondrous than the tale of the 3 apples." To be continued.